divine journey. And with me today is author Colm Holland, across the pond from the UK, and he is joining me now. He helped publish the international bestseller, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and he has written a companion version called The Secret of the Alchemist, and I am so excited to introduce you to him today. He is quite the man, quite the author, and he has had an amazing journey. Now, before we start and dive into it, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell on the top right and the indicator of all so that you can make sure to hear all of the fantastic interviews like the one today with Colm. Colm, thank you so much and welcome to Guided.
Hi, Jodi. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody.
Colm, so with The Alchemist, this not only changed my life, but as we were discussing before, it's changed yours and the power of alchemy, meeting Paulo Coelho. And let's start with that. Let's start with your meeting. So you received the manuscript and it was a weekend, correct?
Correct. So Friday afternoon, I was working at Harper Collins Publishers. I was a middle manager. It was my job to decide how many copies of a book we should publish in Australia. And I was leafing through a pile of manuscripts that landed on my desk. And the cover of one of them just jumped straight out at me. If you Google The Alchemist, the original cover of The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, you'll see that it's not the one that most of us are familiar with today. That's the one most of us are familiar with. This one was purple. It was hand-drawn, and it had what looked like a shepherd boy with a staff, and it also had this figure dressed in an Arabian gown, and on his forehead was the all-seeing eye of God. And that made me break my personal rule of not taking work home at the weekend. I grabbed the cover. It was stapled. It was. I should have kept it. I really should have kept that manuscript. It was.
Do you know anything about the guy who or girl who drew the cover?
No idea. Paulo Coelho was completely unknown around the world at this moment. This is 1993, 27 years ago. He'd only ever been published in Brazil. He'd had fairly good success in Brazil. In Portuguese, he writes and speaks Portuguese. It had just been translated into English, and Harper Collins, where I work, bought the international English language rights. So I was at home at the weekend, and I remembered that I got this manuscript in my briefcase. I put a chair out in my backyard and started to read it, thinking, oh, I'll just give it a quick skim read, because the cover really intrigued me. And I didn't skim read it at all. I read every single word, and the sun literally set on the last page as I finished it. And the hairs went up on the back of my neck, and I just knew, based on my own spiritual and soul journey to that point, that this book was going to be a global bestseller, but it hadn't been presented to me for the Australian territory that it was going to be a global bestseller. It was just another book. I mean, we've published some great books. Course in Miracles by Marianne Williamson, books by Joseph Campbell, books by Dr. Wayne Dyer. So I was used to working with celebrity self-help authors, but this one was unheard of. This Paulo Coelho, who is this guy? Couldn't even pronounce his name at the time. And so I rang my colleague on the Monday morning, got him out of bed pretty much at his home, and said, in California, from Australia, and I said, look, because I was working in Sydney at the time, and I said, look, I know I normally only want like 5,000 copies of this, but I actually want 200,000 copies in paperback. And I could hear him spit his coffee out. And he said, are you drunk? And I said, no. He said, we could go broke if every time you said we need. I said, well, I've never said it before. And he said, no, you haven't. You don't normally, in fact, you're very conservative. So let me look into this. And they came back, and we did print 200,000 copies. We went straight to paperback, bypassed hardcover, and the rest is history.
So he knew at that point, Colm, you were serious. Something about this book moved you like no other. Did he ask you, like, what is it about this book?
No, that wasn't Greg's style. He just said, I'll talk. He was going to talk to everybody else. He was going to get a democratic decision on this. And so others then went and read it and concurred with me, but they still thought I was being a bit outlandish. So Guinness Book of Records, Paulo Coelho, best-selling living author of all time in history, guys, ever, of any single book. in their own lifetime, 85 million, 86 million, however many it is now, copies, 70 languages, beaten only by one other book in the history of publishing, which is J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And there's a little interesting fact, everybody, because both The Alchemist and Harry Potter are about, guess what? Alchemy. So there, let's just keep that in the back of our mind for a moment. Paulo was, I think he was quite taken aback by the sudden success. He came to Australia to do his first ever book signing, and the queue of people wanting to get him to sign a copy of his book went all around the block of the literary festival, and that was, nobody had ever seen that. And we'd had some major global celebrity authors in the past. Nobody had ever seen that. And on the way home, he decided he wanted to stop by Sydney and take myself and my wife and our publicity manager out for a meal just to thank us. And so we went out. The managing director of the company wasn't there. The publicity man, the director wasn't there. It was just the six of us, very intimate setting. And towards the end, we had a wonderful evening. Paulo and his wife Christina were there. He turned to Naomi, my publicity assistant, and said, "I want to give you a gift for looking after us in Australia." And she opened this little box, and it was a dressed diamond ring.
Wow.
Worth a couple of grand. And then he looked at me and he said, "So Colm, I've got a gift for you as well." And I'm thinking, "Ooh, maybe a gold Rolex? That would be..."
Yeah, what is he going to pull out next?
I know. Well, how shallow. I'm embarrassed, but I'll be honest. And that was what flashed through my mind. And he said, "So I asked my wife and I asked God what I should give you. And God told me that I should spend a day of my life doing my alchemy magic just for you, Colm."
Wow.
So I've asked the universe, he said, to give you whatever you want, and it will come to pass. You just need to decide what you want.
That's quite a promise.
So I'm like, "Oh, you know what? The gold Rolex would have looked pretty cool right now." Nobody's ever said that, this to me before. This alchemy stuff, not sure about this. It's a good book, but hey, whatever. Thank you, Paulo. And I was up to my neck at the time in just really being really discontent in my work. I was very, frustrated. I just felt, and I'd been on a journey. I had been on a spiritual journey, but it had gone really cold. But I was reading, people like Joseph Campbell at the time and Marianne Williamson, because I was selling those books. And somewhere, I think Paulo just arrived in my life, like the Alchemist in the story. And we should talk a little bit about the story in the Alchemist as well. So the Alchemist comes into the main character's life, Santiago, at a given moment. And that's what I call the alchemy or the alchemist moment in our lives, when if we've made a commitment, it doesn't matter at what stage in our lives, and it's never too late, by the way, folks. You can always begin this journey. And it's a journey of transformation. Mm-hmm. The book, The Alchemist, tells the story just simply of a young shepherd boy who lives in Spain, and he has a sheep, and he has a dream one night when he's looking after his sheep out in the countryside. And in that dream, a child appears to him and tells him that if he goes to the pyramids in Egypt, he will find this amazing treasure. It's his treasure. And just as the child's about to lead him to the very spot where the treasure's buried, he wakes up. And this happens twice. And when you talk to people about those that have read The Alchemist and say, "Okay, what was your major takeaway? You love The Alchemist, fantastic. So what did it for you?" 9 times out of 10, they'll say, "Well, it encouraged me to believe in my dreams again." And I believe that dreams in both senses of the word, in the sense of what happens in our unconscious when we're asleep or when we're half daydreaming, but also dreams in terms of aspirations and ambitions. I actually believe those two things are completely combined.
Oh, yes.
In the unconscious.
Yep.
In the unconscious mind.
And also I wanted to touch, Colm, on the fact that when you say certain people or certain books come to you at certain pivotal times in your life, Absolutely. In fact, one of the reasons I think it's so important that you're on Guided right now is because we are in a very heated time politically, socially in our world. I believe we're at a hinge point in history, and your message, The Alchemist, the secret of the alchemist, it is needed right now, because I feel like alchemy in everybody's life, and you as an alchemist, as the show being a catalyst to alchemy, is so important. So I think it's a beautiful message that you have, and that's a great point, that it is pivotal right now. We are at a hinge point in history.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about alchemy then, because this is what happened. So after I had this experience with Paulo, things began to happen in my life. Serendipitous, synchronicity, omens, as they're called in the story of the alchemist, began to happen in a way that got my attention, in a way that I'll be straight up. When Paulo said he did a day of his life to do magic for me, I quickly forgot about that, because it wasn't material and it wasn't tangible, and that's the point I was at in my life. In my deepest of desires and dreams, wanted to start my own business. And I was working in middle management, I said, and literally within a month of meeting Paulo, the two senior members of staff above me in the chain hierarchy of publishing, both left. They got promoted into other roles in other companies. So they moved on progressively, very well. And I just got moved up. So within a month, I went 2 complete steps up in my life at Harper Collins. But then most people would think, wow, that's a career in publishing. You should be so grateful. Well, I was at heart really discontent, because in my heart, I wanted my own business. And within 2 years, I actually found, through studying The Alchemist, and the things that I've discovered in that book are in my book, The Secret of the Alchemist. What I discovered in there was that the thing that blocks, the hurdles that stand in the way, can be summarized really easily in the word fear.
Absolutely.
Our dreams are blocked by our own fears. No, listen, guys, there's nobody else standing in the way. It might feel like other people are standing in the way. It might feel like circumstance and the universe is putting up a barrier. But I hate to tell you this, there's only one barrier, and that's the barrier that lies within our own heart. And what I loved about the story of Santiago, the main character in the original story of The Alchemist, is that he goes on the journey, he makes the break, he plucks up the courage to go to North Africa, and he finds ways to face his fear. And my fear at the time when I met Paulo was that I would be putting my whole family's financial situation at terrible risk by leaving my job, and that going out into the unknown and starting my own company would be disastrous. That was my fear. I believed it would be disastrous. So nothing happened. So up to the point that I met Paulo, that I'd been stopping doing that for several years. And then after Paulo did that work for me as an alchemist, what I discovered was that I had this new courage. So those thoughts that, no, I can't do this, it would be a disaster, slowly just began to drift. As I studied The Alchemist and studied alchemy itself, what I realized was that within my own heart lay all the power I ever needed to do the things that I wanted to do. And I struck out and I did it. And within 2 years, I had the largest digital advertising agency in Australia. We employed 85 people. We ran the 2000 Olympics online. Toyota Southeast Asia were a client. I mean, the list and I remember going into the bathroom in my offices. I now had my own offices.
That makes me want to cry. That is so beautiful.
And I just went in the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror. Apart from thinking, gosh, you're getting old, the other thought I had was, how did you get here? Just stop for a moment and think what brought you to this point. And I have to say that it was that night in the restaurant with Paulo. That was the pivot point. So if what I'm saying today, guys, on July the 4th, it is today,
I'm literally crying right now.
If this is resonating with you, then I want to say this, that if you're sitting on a dream, if you were already on the journey, and the journey is the journey of transformation, by the way, and I will talk in a bit more depth what we mean by transformation. It's the alchemy journey is a journey of transformation toward true empowerment. So we need to maybe unpack some of that. But if you've made that, those of you who have made the journey, you know you're on that journey. If you feel you've reached that point, you're at exactly the same point that I was at 27 years ago. You're probably at the fictional character in the story. And if that's where you are today, then maybe I am the alchemist for you, because I'm the one, a bit like, you know, if you go sky jumping, the guy says, okay, 3, 2, 1, and gives you that gentle push out of the plane.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give you that gentle push out of the plane today, because that's sometimes what we need. The answer you're looking for, you already have that answer. The solution to what will make your dream happen, you know what the solution is, and alchemy will help you plug into that, to tap into that, and to discover the force that exists in all the universe that makes this happen, that even put the desire of the dream in our heart in the first place, and that is a power called unconditional love.
Yeah. Colm, what do you say to people who theoretically know about alchemy, they've studied it, they think it's a beautiful concept, but perhaps it's a little abstract for them? So to be able to pull it down and ground it for them. So for instance, I was on that train of, okay, postponement before I jumped, I took the leap, you know, I did take the leap. My sister, on the other hand, she's in California. She's just, you know, just petrified with fear to take her jump, but she knows she needs to. She's a beautiful artist. She makes jewelry, among other things. And she knows she needs to, theoretically, she knows about alchemy. She's a spiritual person, but it's almost like in life, we tend to create these scenarios for ourselves, almost unconsciously, like you've talked about, where we create the postponement because of our own fear. And so we create these barriers that then we wind up, oh no, not yet. Oh no, not yet. You know, so what would you have to say about that?
You need to actually go to the heart of what alchemy really teaches, rather than the theory. You need to get into the practice. So alchemy took a big branch like that during around about the medieval period, 1200, 1300, 600-700 years ago. And two schools emerged. And the interesting thing is that Paulo, in the preface to one of his editions of The Alchemist, talks about this, that there is what we call the book version of alchemy, which was what the European alchemists did. That was the journey they went on. But there was also another branch called the Arabic branch of alchemy, and the Arabic branch of alchemy almost threw away the books. Just, you know, don't need those, chuck them away. The universe is our book, and we are connected to everything in the universe. And the guy we have to thank, in a way, for helping Paulo to understand this, but also the rest of us, is a guy called Carl Jung, Professor Carl Jung. Those of you who know, a colleague of Sigmund Freud, went out and started his own branch of psychoanalysis, which was all based on archetypes and primarily the unconscious. What Jung discovered, he was an alchemist, by the way. He was an avid student, devoted student of alchemy, also thanks to Sir Isaac Newton, the guy who sat under the tree and the apple landed on his head and he discovered gravity. He was an alchemist, and he collected the books, and because of that, Carl Jung was able to source these books. And what Carl Jung discovered is that alchemy is not just theory and code and secrets and laboratories turning lead into gold and creating the philosopher's stone and reading the emerald tablet and discovering the elixir of life and all those things. Those are all code. Those are just symbols for something much more important.
Or the secret, code.
It's just code. Get with the program, let's not be evangelical, let's not be fundamentalist about this. There's a deeper meaning behind it, and the deeper meaning is that in our unconscious, so according to Carl Jung, our minds are pretty evenly split between unconscious and conscious, except the unconscious mind probably has about 90% of the activity. It's just that we're only normally aware of the conscious mind. So when you sleep and all those weird dreams you have and so on, that's all happening in the unconscious. But the unconscious also is the repository of our life experience, but not just our life experience, those of our ancestors as well, but also that of the rest of mankind and humankind, womankind. We're all joined through our unconscious in what's called, the collective unconscious.
Right.
And the alchemists knew this. So the alchemists 5,000 years ago were talking about this stuff. So there's nothing new under the sun. The ancient wisdom of the alchemists were talking this, particularly the Arabic branch of alchemy said that the sun, the moon, the desert, the world, we are all joined in this, what they call the prima materia. It lives within the very cells of our being, and in the table that I'm leaning on, and in the trees outside my window, and the air we're breathing is this prima materia, and it's the force that holds all things together.
Right.
It's the core of all matter. And some people call that God, some people call that spirit. Doesn't really matter what we call it, as long as we acknowledge that it exists. But in my book, what I discovered, the thing that released me to be able to tap into that power, was that I realized that that force has a character. It's not a being for me, but it has a character, and that character is unconditional love. So the very force that brought all of this into being, that holds us all together, that is our future and is our past, is our present, it loves me.
Mm-hmm.
It loves me unconditionally. It loves every bit of it. It even loves the bit I hate about myself. It even loves more than I do, the despised and the rejected and the bits of myself that I want to keep hidden, the bits that I want to keep down in my unconscious. It
Right.
loves all of those things, and it wants to it wants our participation in that act of self-love.
So for somebody, that's so beautiful. For somebody who may think unconditional love is abstract,
Mm-hmm.
for you, is it then like you mentioned, it's a force. For you, is it a feeling then?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an experience.
An experience.
Yes. So everybody out there who's not experienced unconditional love, my heart goes out to you. Do whatever you can. Open yourself up in whatever way you are led to open yourself up, because it's like living in one dimension without unconditional love and living in another dimensional with unconditional love in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I have days from the moment I was 18 years old. I was very fortunate. So I met unconditional love at the age of 18. It came through Christian orthodoxy, and I had this amazing experience. I've talked about it in my book. I won't repeat it here, but if you want to hear about it, and even the person that was with me at the time, when I invited unconditional love into my life, when I opened my eyes, he was in tears as well. It was almost a room lit up, because every ounce of my fiber wanted that abundant life in my life. And then I wasted a few years on and off trying to squeeze that experience into traditional Christian doctrine, which I failed at miserably, because I just kept talking about unconditional love and everything. No, you've got to talk about God. No, but I'd much rather talk about unconditional love. It's amazing, And I was struggling at the time. So I went through that period. And then looking back, what I realized that once I began to study the Alchemist and study alchemy is that there is a process. I mean, you referred to your sister. There is a process that your sister can tap into that is an ancient alchemical process that will lead her through to the point that where you can actually challenge your fears and deal with them and move forward. And it's 3 phases. The alchemists in their laboratory, when they had the symbolism of turning lead into gold, they would begin with the base material, the ugly, as they called it, the lead. So we need to take the lead of our life, the bits that we despise, we need to face them. I'm sorry, everybody. I wish there was an easier way around this. I wish, I've got this, somebody, my son bought me this for a joke the other week. Look, it's my magic love wand.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is so pretty.
I wish alchemy was as easy as waving this wand around,
Right?
but I hate to tell you it's not. Because the alchemists used to call it the great work. And you're going to have to commit to do the great work. And the beginning of the great work is you're going to have to be honest with your real self privately. If you want to get a counselor, I also actually recommend getting a counselor, because this isn't going to be pleasant. You might need a holding hand.
Indeed. And I think that's why so many people maybe hold off on doing it, or they postpone this work, is because even in your book, you talk about basically slaying your dragons or confronting your dragons, because some people call it shadow work.
It is. That's another name for it. Yeah. So that's the name that Carl Jung. So within the unconscious lives the shadow self. The shadow self, in Carl Jung's terminology, are all those bits that we've suppressed, repressed, memories of abuse, memories of pain of any description. And behind every pain, of course, is a wound, mostly of which we're not the makers of those wounds. They were done to us rather than by us. But what unfortunately happens if we continue to repress, those of you that study Jung will know exactly what I'm talking about. If we repress those, they just have this nasty habit, like a dragon, bursting out at inappropriate moments in our adult relationships, and can be really dangerous. It comes out, blasts fire, just tries to destroy everything, including relationships and people we love. And that's where I was at the age of, in my early 20s. So unconditional love opened me up to those bits and enabled me to see that the problem was not the other people that I was projecting, oh, you don't love me in the way I want you to love me. The problem was I didn't love myself in the way that I needed to be loved. And if I could master that. So I made a decision. I won't go into the full detail, but I made a decision to enter the dark night of the soul. So I studied the work of the writings of Thomas Merton, Catholic priest, a monk who also studied deeply Buddhism. And I'm sure many of you have read Thomas Merton's work, but he advocates deliberately going into the unconscious and facing the darkness. And it was a year. I did that work for a year. I was very fortunate. I surrounded myself with people who could support me, but I thought I really want to make a difference in my own life so that I can make a difference in the world.
Absolutely. Now, for my audience, whether you call it unconditional love, God, I mean, I see it all as one, but I feel like whatever can help you open up and go deep, like Colm is talking about, and face your shadows. I think that's so important to be able to do this work. And like you talked about, Colm, it's not the other people in your life. It's not those relationships. And if it's not the relationship ordeal, then it oftentimes manifests in health issues, if you don't face your own shadows and deal with that.
It manifests itself in different people in different ways.
Right.
And it's what we do with it. So there is only one solution as far as I know. And if anybody else can find another solution, I'm open to it. But for me, I had to go into the very darkest part, and it was pretty black.
Yeah.
I reached a point in my life, and that's why they call it the dark night of the soul. And another reason I chose to do it is if you don't choose to do it, the circumstances of life will often bring you to it anyway. When you're ill-equipped, when you're least equipped to deal with it. So a really serious, grief or trauma, accident, sickness, illness, whatever, will take you to that same dark place. But you're having then to deal with two things. You're having to deal with the dark place, and you're having to deal with the circumstances around you. So if you do have the opportunity and you're thinking, what shall I do next with my soul journey? And you haven't gone into the dark night of the soul, I do recommend it, only in as much as it will release the real you. Because when you go, this is the irony, this is the paradox of alchemy. Alchemy is full of paradoxes. When you go into the most despised places of yourself and you face the bits that you reject most of the time in your thoughts and in your life, they become your greatest treasure.
Oh, yes.
They become the power that can make you the real you and lead you forward and give you all the power that you long for and are searching for in other things. So you might want riches, you might want wealth, you might want good health, you might want amazing relationships, you might want all these wonderful things. And so we pursue them and pursue them, little knowing that actually the journey is not out there, the journey is within. So a new light began to dawn for me. And what I discovered when I went into dark night of soul, which is the black phase of the alchemist, when in the laboratory where they put the heat on the lead to break it down. So we were breaking the self down to its base elements. And what I discovered in there was a very, very angry boy. So within my life, there was this inner child. He'd been locked away, I discovered, as I went into the next phase, which was the white phase in alchemy. And if you want to know more about it, it's all in my book. I walk you through the history of all of this.
It's beautiful. Before we get to the light phase, more about the shadow work is the regression of different ages as you go into that shadow work. Maybe you need to go back to that 5-year-old. Maybe you need to go back to that 10-year-old, that 12-year-old, that 16-year-old, and revisit that child, that teenager, who might be angry, who might be sad, who might feel some shame for whatever reason. And each time you go back, you discover something new. And it's so interesting. I've done that work and I continue to do that work, and it's really fascinating. The other day I got a massage and I noticed there was some pain in my left back. So my first chakra area, which has to do with some security and finances and all that kind of stuff. And it took me back to a point in time in my childhood. And you can tell when somebody pushes on different pressure points too, maybe certain visions will come and pop up in your mind too. And that will help you revisit different time periods that you need to revisit. So whether it's, going back in meditation or different modalities that Colm is talking about, it's so important in this alchemy work to be able to go through those portals of power or to have that ultimate treasure from those wounds. And a lot of people don't realize that really is the ultimate power and treasure, like you were talking about, Colm. Mm-hmm. And it is difficult work, but it's so worth it. So thank you for sharing that.
And some people just, because of the circumstances of their life, they have demanding situations, work and so on, they have to do with. Sometimes you just have to dip in and dip out.
Right.
As long as you feel safe, as long as you feel, don't put yourself in a position of a complete nervous breakdown. I don't recommend that at all. So you have to be responsible at the same time. But unless there is an element of this in your spiritual journey, then I just doubt very much whether you'll enter into the true empowerment that I talk about in my book. I was very fortunate as coming out of the black phase. So I discovered this really angry child who I managed to give a voice to, which was great. And so I just almost as an adult stepped back and let the child and love have this argument. Where the child, blamed everybody and everything for all the demise in his life, which was well founded. I then discovered I didn't know why he was so angry. Believe it or not, I had no memory of why he was so angry. And as I went then into the white phase, love will guide you. By the way, when the time is right, love will take you from the alchemist black phase into the alchemist white phase. And so in the laboratory. Now we've got the base element. We've applied lots of heat and it's black, and there's this. Then they apply more heat and more passion, the inner fire, as it were, into the self to purify.
Mm-hmm. The refiner's fire.
The refiner's fire. And what I love about the story in the Alchemist, so all this happens to this main character, by the way, Santiago.
Mm-hmm.
So Santiago arrives in Africa, and the moment he arrives, so the moment he goes on the alchemist journey, he loses everything. So that's the black phase. He's robbed all the money he's saved up. It's all gone. Money from selling his sheep disappears, and he's destitute.
Yeah. And sometimes that just goes to show sometimes bad things happen to good people and you don't know why, and you deal with it, and it's for a reason, because it helps you go within. If
you're prepared to make that journey, if that commitment to transformation, it's valuable stuff. So he goes, he walks up through the village, and he goes up and he finds this place in the story called the Crystal Shop, and it's a little shop that sells cut glass crystal. And he walks in, he feels impelled to walk in, and he just says to the shop owner, if I clean the dirty glasses that are in your shop window, will you give me a meal? Because I've got no money, I don't know how I'm going to eat. And the guy doesn't answer him, so he starts cleaning anyway. And as he's cleaning, two people walk into the shop and buy the glasses that he's cleaned. And of course, that he stays a year, and he turns that business into this very profitable business. It's a metaphor, folks. The cut glass crystal is, what's the main component of cut glass crystal? It's lead.
Interesting.
So he's purifying, so he's cleaning, cleansing. It's the cleansing of the self. So we cleanse those base elements that we used to despise, that we used to dread, that we used to keep buried and hidden. We nurture them, we love them, we embrace them, we allow unconditional love. We need to become unconditional love to ourselves before we can ever love other people, in my experience. So that's what the white phase is. And then eventually Santiago leaves the crystal shop, and he's got gold in his pocket, and he can continue his journey to the pyramids. And that brings us on to the next phase in a moment. My personal white phase was brought about. I was very fortunate to meet a guy called Dr. Frank Lake, who was a professional psychiatrist based in the UK, who was pioneering what he called primal therapy. Most of us know it as rebirthing therapy, where using hyperventilation, you can go and relive memories from the womb, from early childhood, and even conception. And he visited a community that I belonged to at the time, and both my wife and I went through that, and it changed our lives.
Wow.
What I took about pain, so after I did the black phase, what I discovered was I was starting to get this terrible ache all down my left-hand side. Almost like I'd had a heart attack or something, but I hadn't had a heart attack. I got checked out. There was nothing wrong with me. I was in my late 20s, early 30s, so I was pretty young still. And when I went into the primal therapy, this intensified, and the facilitators that were working with me, I was in the womb. I suddenly felt I was in the womb, and I was being invaded by this poison, and the poison was being stored all up this side of my body, and it could have crippled me. It was painful. It was a real disability. I thought it was psychosomatic myself. I had no reason why I've got this. And during the primal therapy, we worked on it, and we managed to push this sort of black, it felt like a black poison out of my body, out of this side of my body, back up the umbilical cord, in this sort of self-hypnosis state that you get into in primal therapy. And within a few days, the pain had gone, and it's never returned. And I spoke to my mother. My mother was still alive, fortunately, not long after. It was actually my wife who asked her the question, did you have any issues when you were pregnant with Colm? And she said, yeah, well, I had sepsis. I nearly died of sepsis. So her body had this poison flowing around her body, and it got into me as a fetus. It came in through the placenta, and I was absorbing it as well as and if I hadn't gone into that primal therapy work, I would never have known that, and I would never have managed to clear that. So there are other benefits, physical benefits, as you so rightly say, in this work, if we're prepared to have a mind that's open to receiving, wholeness and well-being from this transitional process. So that's the white phase.
Indeed. How did you feel once you cleared that and you had that knowledge that you hadn't had before? Was it like this aha, oh, okay, now I understand all of this and it's cleared now?
Yes. So I did a lot more of the work as a result of that. So if I'm a bit of a doubting Thomas, as you can already tell. I need something practical to happen to me to wake me up and say, okay, this is real, Colm. All right, pay attention, take notice. So then I did a lot more work. I looked at my ancestors, and I've revealed some of that in my book. My attitudes to money and wealth came from my ancestral inheritance of feeling dispossessed, disinherited of wealth, and there's a fabulous story in there, which I'm actually writing another book about those characters, my ancestors.
Oh, I cannot wait. I know so many things are locked in our DNA and we don't realize it. You know, we don't realize what we hold on to. So I think just that phase of really looking deep within ourselves and doing that alchemical work is just beautiful. Now, you mentioned as a side note that it was John Lennon who also did this type of work.
Yeah, John, I only found out years later that when I was doing that work in England, he and Yoko went to Los Angeles, I think it was, and we all know he had issues from his childhood, and it affected his personality and the way he treated people and so on. I identified with that, and yeah, he did some work, and apparently it really helped him. I know Yoko's spoken about it on a few occasions as well, how it helped John. So it was. There's not much of it being practiced, unfortunately, at the moment.
Right. Because I haven't heard much about this modality.
No, you can't. Look at yellow pages or white pages, and it doesn't rebirthing. There are some people you probably can find it if there is a group in the UK doing it, but nothing to the extent that we work. And primarily that's because it is so effective that unless you've got really skilled practitioners with you who know exactly what they're doing and can create the right protective environment, it probably isn't recommended, because you could be left in a bit of a state of no man's land between sanity and insanity. So yeah, you do need to do it with people who know what they're doing.
Interesting. Okay.
I did see in Goop, Gwyneth's program on Netflix. It's Goop, isn't it? Gwyneth Paltrow's.
Yes, Gwyneth Paltrow.
They went to Hawaii and did it with mushrooms.
Okay. I was going to also ask you, what do you think about quantum healing hypnosis therapy? Perhaps that's a modality to delve into.
Yes, that would do it as well. There is no one way.
Okay.
But that's what did it for me, and I'm not prescribing it. I'm just saying that that's what worked, and other people just may find other methods. But whatever, you just need something that's going to help you identify the root cause of the wounds and the pain.
Right.
That can be hypnosis, that can be any kind of therapy. But having identified them, the trick is not to just nurse them. They've got to be transformed. And the only thing I know that will transform them is unconditional love. So they've got to be loved on, they've got to be welcomed, they've got to be nurtured, they've got to be embraced. So what I then discovered in my own experience, that I was a Harry Potter character in real life. My mother had epilepsy when I was a toddler, and the angry boy was an angry boy who used to get locked in the cupboard. She did it to protect me, which was fine. So it wasn't a deliberate abuse. She didn't hate me. But I didn't understand it. I was only 18 months, 2.5 years. I think it lasted about a year of my life until she was diagnosed and she was medicated, and it was all fine. And we've had wonderful reconciliation over the years because of my journey really into unconditional love. I've learned to love her unconditionally, and she had no power at the time to not be the way she was. It was a medical condition. But yeah, I was pretty angry at being locked in the cupboard.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Now, yeah. And one of the things I was going to mention is when you have a guide as Unconditional Love to help you through those dark phases, I feel like you're able to then learn from, you know, the child that's demanding you see certain things, or like you said, the ability to reconcile with certain relationships. So I think it's so beautiful.
Yes. So the child within, or whatever you discover, it's much harder for some people. I totally accept that some people have been so badly abused in childhood, and my heart breaks when you know, I talk to people and they tell me about their life of abuse, you know, where they were abused so badly. Sending love to those of you for whom that's applicable, and you're going to need more help. You need to surround yourself with just more people who are going to love you and accept you at that point. There are some great examples of alchemists of that sort. Of Oprah Winfrey, of course, is a fabulous. But Oprah's learned the trick. She's drawn on so many people, powerful people in her life, drawn them into her life to help her get to the point that she's at. She hasn't tried to do it alone. So this is where we're all part of the collective unconscious, folks. We need.
I think that's a good point. And also, you know, I think because of so many people going through abuse, I think that's why there's spiritual bypassing as well. And they don't want to do that work, or they postpone it, is because they're on this happy, positive, like, oh, we've got to do that spiritual positivity, you know, and they don't even want to go into that other realm, and it's spiritual bypassing. And so I think if you surround yourself with powerful people, like you said, and unconditional love, that is the way to do it.
Yes, there's no other way. Sorry, folks. Just go in a very big circle, and you'll be back right where you started again. And you've lost quite a lot of time in the process. So, but if that's your journey, that's your journey. That's how it works out. So Paulo Coelho, in his book The Alchemist, and in my book, we talk about this thing, true empowerment. So let's just get back to true empowerment for a moment. So this ability to overcome the obstacles, to love unconditionally yourself, to love other people unconditionally, to embrace life in all its fullness, and eke all the benefit that life has to give. That is what I call true empowerment. It's not a perfect state. It's not a state of perfection. It's a state of the real true self. So we're not trying to become somebody else. We're not trying to become, I mean, people say a better version of ourselves. I actually don't think about becoming a better version. There isn't a better version of myself. There's just me. And I often say to people, you know, you're listening to them and watching the boy that was locked in the cupboard. This is not who the adult Colm used to be. It's only because I let the boy out and let him in all his power out that I was able to even write my book, The Secret of the Alchemist. So he wrote that book. I didn't do it from a conscious, logical sense. I allowed my inner self, my true self, my wounded self, who as a friend of mine says, we're all wounded healers.
That's beautiful.
We need to become, you know, wounded healers, in the sense that we never release completely from our wound, because that's what keeps us grounded. Mm-hmm. But remember that in the wound is the treasure. That's where it goes. So the next phase in alchemy is the final phase, the red phase, which is all about moving into action. And the thing about the red phase is that you will know when it's the right time, because it brings us right back to the beginning of where we started, Jodi, today, which is that's the point of which we quite often need an alchemist. It's the point when somebody on our behalf needs to invoke the universe, brother sun, sister moon, the king, the queen, the birth of the philosopher's child. It's all in my book. If you're interested in the alchemical symbolism, I've referred to it and explained it all in my book. But this is the critical stage, because so many people reach the point of having a quite successful spiritual journey, soul journey, and then it's very easy to just sit back on our laurels and think, okay, so in Santiago's case, he arrived at the oasis. He met Fatima, who becomes his lifelong love. And he's thinking, you know what, I might just settle down here. This is a nice place. You know, there's water, there's palm trees, a beautiful woman. You know, a shepherd boy could do a lot worse than this. And I guarantee that we will all reach that point if we're on the journey at some stage. And it's what the alchemist does, and I won't quote it because we don't really have time. But the alchemist comes in Paulo's book to Santiago and says, hey, if you stay here and you give up on the final leg of your journey, then eventually all of the magic, all of the enthusiasm, all of the joy, all of the bliss that you've been experiencing up to this point will just gradually fade. And you'll just become a disillusioned old man or old woman. So the choice is yours. Do you want to carry on? Have you been to the pyramids yet? Have you dug in the sand? Have you actually found the real treasure? The power, the real power that is your birthright? And of course, Santiago goes, no, I haven't. And he said, well, I'm giving you the option here. Do you want to come with me? I'll take you there now. But you've got to leave the oasis. So you've got to make another commitment. You've got to make another leap of faith. You've got to make a new break. And you've got to come with me, and I will show you that you own in your own heart now all of the power you need to change your world. And one of the things I say throughout my book, almost at the end of every chapter, Jodi, you've read it. I said, so as I was writing The Secret of the Alchemist, for 3 years, I called every day on the universe. I did alchemy magic so that every reader of my book, when they read the book, if they want to make that move, they want to move forward and know what they want, then I've already called on the universe to give you that power and that you will receive everything you need from the universe to make that happen. You will be the alchemist in your world.
What a blessing.
That is my promise in the book.
What a gift. From an alchemist to us, everyone. What a gift that is.
Because that's what Paulo did for me, and that's what changed my life. And it's the least I could do is to pass that on. And I've got a lovely little story. How are we doing for time?
We're good. We're good.
We're good for another story. So
yes,
there came a point in my book where I was terrified. I actually woke up one day and I don't know why it hadn't dawned on me. What's Paulo going to say when I publish this book? Because nobody's ever done a work of criticism of his work, of The Alchemist. It's never been written. So it's a first. My book is, and for 3 weeks recently, I was #1 in Amazon for 20th century literary criticism, which was never my intention, trust me. I didn't write it as a work of literary criticism, but it is, I guess. And I thought, well, how's Paulo going to take it? What if he doesn't agree with my interpretation and so on? And it almost became like a block, a funny kind of writer's block. I think, oh dear. Am I going to get into trouble with Paulo? I don't want to upset him. This was not my intention. And my wife knocked on my office door. She said, "Can I interrupt?" She said, "Yes." She said, "I've been going through some old photos, and you'll never believe what I've just found." And she handed me this envelope, and I've got it here. There was a photograph in this envelope, and I completely, utterly forgotten that this photograph even existed. She found it in the bottom of a box from years and years and years ago, family photos, and it's a photo of the night in the restaurant.
Oh, that's lovely.
So there's a younger Colm, there's Paulo, there's his wife, there's my wife, and there's a publicity manager and her assistant in the restaurant in Sydney.
I love that. It
and there's
all comes
Paulo.
full circle.
I know, and there's Paulo smiling at me. And she said, "So if you've got any doubts about what Paulo thinks, just put that photograph on your desk and just remember what he said that night and keep writing." So I have to thank my wife for giving me the nudge and giving me that photograph. But that's a synchronicity moment that happens to me every day. There isn't a day goes by since I made the commitment to transformation. And that's how you know you're on the journey, Jodi, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And
It,
you know this. You've had this happen to you
yeah,
dozens of
in
times.
fact, you remind me, you know, at the end of every chapter, like Colm said, he reminds us of this. And also another person who reminds me of this is Michael Bernard Beckwith, because he talks about, you know, we can ask, you know, love, help me, you know, see you. Let me see you in the trees. Let me see you in the grass. Let me see you when I walk, you know, anything. I was in Sedona 2 years ago and I asked to see love, because for some reason I was having a time in my life where just certain relationships I was just down and out about. And I asked the universe, I asked God, please let me see love. Let me see you in everything I do today. And it was just that particular day. And I'm telling you, I saw love in everything. It was the most beautiful thing. I remember I was in tears. I saw this one couple. It was this beautiful redheaded woman and this beautiful black man. They came out of this store and they were just, I mean, if you could just draw them, it would be the most beautiful picture. They just were just enamored with each other. They were so in love. They were holding hands and they were just looking at each other with just such, oh, I just can't even describe it. It was beautiful. And they were just walking down in Sedona. And I tell you, every turn was just another picturesque moment of love. And I would always see these views in Sedona and it would just remind me of love. So seriously, if you ask the universe, you ask God for that love, that unconditional love, and also to see yourself through the eyes of unconditional love, which, you know, we've been talking about today, and to see the shadows through unconditional love. And what is it teaching us? That it's so powerful.
Thomas Merton, who I mentioned earlier, had that moment. And there's a plaque in a street corner. I forget exactly where it is just now, but there's a plaque where it said, on this very spot, the spiritual monk Thomas Merton had a moment of transfiguration, he calls it. And that's, you know, when you think of, if you know the Bible or Christian teaching, Jesus had a moment of transfiguration on the Mount, where Elijah and Elisha and all of that. We can have those moments, as you just described. That, what you just described as a transfiguration moment, that's where our physical self becomes one with the spiritual self and the spirit of love in the universe, and there is no separation. You can't live in that state, unfortunately. It'd be lovely if you could, but you know, there are things to do, chores, washing up needs doing, garden needs doing. I mean, there's the things that need doing, but you can, I think a lot of reason why, you know, people still go into, you know, a monastic existence is to try and seize that opportunity as often as they can. But yeah, Thomas Merton definitely had that. So that's what happened to Santiago. This brings us beautifully, Jodi, well done, into the red phase, because the red phase is marked by a thing called what I call the great test. So you've been on the journey, you've found unconditional love, you have discovered a power of intuition, you've discovered that you are one with the universe and that, you know, quite a lot is possible, that you can manifest change, you can manifest wellness, you can manifest this stuff. But to become, in the alchemist terms, the true alchemist is to understand that you, not only can you manifest it, but you can actually bring about real change in the world around you. You can actually alter the circumstances and the outcome of the world around you. Now, this might get a bit spooky for some people. Are we talking about white magic? No, in my opinion, we're not talking about white magic. But if you want the source of this, go back to the story of the alchemist. So the alchemist leads Santiago into the desert. Eventually, he learns to see the power of love even in a grain of sand. He realizes he's part of the soul of the world, that there's no separation between him and the power that holds everything together. And he reaches this point where they're attacked by bandits and they are threatened with death, and all their money is going to be taken from them. And the alchemist turns to the chieftain who's about to murder them and says, oh, before you do this, you might just want to see what this boy can do. This boy is an alchemist, and he can turn himself into the wind. And Santiago's thinking, no, I can't. You're kidding. Not me. Oh, him. No, not me. Yes. Oh, me. Oh, I can I? Really? And the alchemist says, yeah. So he's going to do it in 2 days' time. He's going to turn himself into wind. So if you keep us alive for 2 days, this is what's going to happen. And then, of course, Santiago turns to the alchemist and says, how on earth am I ever going to do this? This is impossible. The alchemist said, this is the great test. So if you're really going to go into a world of magic and power, then you've got to do this. There is no other way. There's no going back. You can go back if you like, but if you want to enter into your full power, your full potential, then you need to do this. You need to risk your life almost. And so he goes off and he starts talking to the sun and the wind and the sand and the desert. And eventually in that conversation, he begins gets into a meditative state, and he draws upon the real power of spiritual alchemy, where we can harness the universe. We can harness unconditional love. We can harness the power within us, and we can make things happen. And in his case, he realized that all of the power that we see that brought all of the planets into existence, that brought all of creation into existence, that power lives in his own heart. And that he, a boy, Santiago, can perform miracles. And then the wind comes up and he disappears, and the camp is completely, almost destroyed by the wind. And when the wind dies down, Santiago is hundreds and hundreds of yards away on the other side. What's happened? What's the metaphor here? He has made the ultimate transformation, all that we've been working for in our life, all through our various stages. He's made the ultimate transformation into that next dimension. And the most wonderful thing that dawned on me when I read that was that we can all do that in our own lives. So I'm here to encourage you, everybody, keep going.
Absolutely.
Don't give up. The power is there. It is yours. All of those seemingly unsurmountable circumstances of your life can be overcome. Now, I'm not saying that a miraculous healing. I'm not a miraculous healer. I'm not saying that if you've got a disability, that's only going to. I'm not talking about that. It's a state of mind. It's a state of heart that transforms those circumstances into something extremely positive.
Yes.
It's not the miracle cure. It's not the magic waving of the wand. There's nothing to do with alchemy whatsoever. So that's the stage that I reached, which I write about in my book. And you can read my book. It's available on Amazon. It's in Kindle. It's The Secret of the Alchemist by Colm Holland. It's in Kindle, it's in paperback. There's also an audio book. You can hear me reading my book in Google Play or Apple. It's there as well.
It is a beautiful book.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry?
I said it is an absolute beautiful book. I mean, just yes. In the first chapter, I was in tears. It's very powerful. It's very powerful. And just having it as a companion book with The Alchemist is just beautiful. It's beautiful. One of the things I wanted to let everyone know is that there's going to be a launch for The Secret of the Alchemist. And that's going to be a virtual launch. It's coming right up in just a few weeks. That's right, Colm.
Yep. July 31st.
You can register for free at mindbodyspirit.co.uk. And there's going to be some other people as well. But I mean, Colm Holland, he is the man of the hour, and he's going to be launching The Secret of the Alchemist. You can go online and you can register for free. So there are limited spaces though. So I would hop on there and do it, today if you can. And then also, I want to let you know that you can find all of this information that we've talked about today and much more at colmholland.com. And there's more about Colm's podcast, the book, of course, where you can find it. Also, to sign up for the newsletter. So you can subscribe to the podcast and the newsletter. And then also, I'm just looking over here, I'm glancing at his, let's see, colmholland.com. And there's also, you're going to be doing a mini series, right, with classes?
Yes. So thanks for bringing that up, Jodi. I haven't officially announced it yet, but I am going to do a series of free workshops. By the way, if you pre-order my book on Amazon and send us to the website, there's a contact form, and send us your order number, I do have a free giveaway, which we're just releasing this week, called My Alchemy Journal. So I've laid out all of the principles of alchemy that I know I've learned over the years, and I put it into a blank space journal with lots of hints and questions so that you can complete your own record of your own alchemy journey. And we're giving that away as a ebook for free to anybody who pre-orders on Amazon, and you send us your details, your email address, and we'll forward that on to you. So we've got that as well. But the workshops, they're interesting. I'm not doing the workshops in the sort of similar way that a lot of people, $30 to hear me talk for 3 hours. I am just going to talk anyway. They will be free. But what I am offering, what my real work, what I do when I'm not writing, is I do help individuals. If you believe you've reached the alchemy moment where you need someone to hold your hand, to help invoke the power of the universe, because you believe you've reached that point and you just need that extra help from another helping hand. So I do offer that, but only if I feel that it's right in that person's life and that person believes that it's right in their life. I just helped a bunch of guys in California who were struggling with their startup business, and I joined them 7 years ago, and the business was unsellable. And 7 years later, they just sold it in excess of $20 million.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's my, and I got so that was one of my latest projects, but it doesn't have to be material success. It can be emotional. I tell a lovely story, I think, in my book about Victoria, the artist. In my very early days as an alchemist, she worked in the same publishing company as me and was very disillusioned with her life, and had a successful life, family, a lovely husband, etc. But just didn't know what her gift was. And her boss gave her this dreadful task of going through boxes and boxes of pictures and transparencies of Australian art and cataloguing them. A thankless job. It was complete disarray. Hundreds of books, all just thrown, transparencies of Australian artists thrown into a box. And she was talking to me at the time, and I was telling her about how she needed to start looking at the alchemy process. So she did, and at the same time as she was sorting through all these boxes, she realized what her thing was, and she was an artist. And
beautiful.
She did this journey on her own after that initial session that we had, and she invited me 3 years later. She was exhibited in the largest art gallery in Australia, in the equivalent of what in the UK we have the summer exhibition. Lots of galleries have, where artists can submit to a competition to be exhibited. And she, out of 1,000 people, she was one of 23 to be exhibited. And she'd never painted in her life before. So that mundane task of sifting through some of the best Australian artists in the world, in the country, meant that she discovered her true talent. And now she sells her paintings for thousands. And
that is incredible. Okay, so I have to, as you're speaking about all these beautiful stories of alchemy and you as the alchemist touching their lives to launch them into just this beautiful world and invoking the universe and unconditional love to help them, I was thinking of something. It's a synchronicity that happened to me. And it just dawned on me that it has to do with you.
No.
so I was headed to St. George, which is about 45 minutes from where I am now here in southern Utah. And I kept seeing something, and even in the clouds, it was a formation of Australia and New Zealand. And then somewhere else, I kept seeing Australia and New Zealand. And I asked my friend, I said, is something going on in Australia and New Zealand? And I Googled it, and I kept saying, oh my gosh, I hope nothing's going to happen to Australia and New Zealand. I said, there were those fires. I knew that happened, but what is going on in Australia and New Zealand? And then it dawned on me. It's you. It's all your work. It's like Paulo Coelho. It's all of that. It's now coming together. The beautiful alchemist.
Yeah, I do have that effect on people.
It's just so funny that it's just now dawning on me. I'm going to have to email you the picture I literally took of clouds, and it is the formation of Australia.
So, yes, is anything good going to come out of Australia? Yes, lots of great things have come out of Australia.
Absolutely. Lots.
Lots of magic happens there. And the indigenous people of Australia have known this stuff for thousands of years, of course. And it's wonderful that they're rediscovering it and passing it on to their future generations. So that, because it really, I hesitated to move to Australia when we did, because I wasn't born there, because of the treatment of the indigenous people. I struggled with that, and I was really pleased that while we were there were major steps forward in that area, and there was a major apology, and lots of land is being given back to the indigenous people, but they themselves have got this incredible struggle now to regain their rituals and their folklore, and because they had it all. I mean, they exactly all the things we've been talking about.
Yes.
They knew so many of these things, and so yeah, it is heartening to know that they're slowly getting back there again.
Yes, absolutely. Colm, this has been such a beautiful time with you. Thank you so much for being on Guided. One of the other things I wanted to let everybody know is the Alchemy Lab. That is the name of Colm's podcast, the Alchemy Lab, which is a beautiful, beautiful name for it. So thank you so much, Colm. And I love your book, and I would highly suggest that everybody not only read that, but hurry and get on the virtual launch, okay, at mindbody.com. All right. Mindbodyspirit.co.uk. All right, Colm, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.
You have a wonderful July 4th, and thank you for all the wonderful work you're doing with your podcast and everything else. On behalf of everybody, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bless you, Jodi.
Thank you.